So just confirm whether you are clearly able to hear me.
So now it seems fine. So
Okay. So let it be a little stable. Hopefully it will work. Okay. So now we are moving on to couple of new directions in incentive theory, which will mean that there would not be any explicit incentive for the current performance, but still people would have incentive to work hard, and as a result, they will contribute to the firm value. Okay. So now we'll be concerned with two models. One will be related to career concerns of the worker, so they will work out of their career concern. And second one will be the investment in capabilities or skill acquisition, and this skill acquisition will be mainly firm specific skill acquisition that will be done by the worker. And we'll try to see whether there may not be any incentive scheme which will be acting for the worker to take these actions, but still they will take these actions out of concerns for something else. Okay. So one possible concern is career concern. Second is their concern for the some kind of whether they will be retained in the firm or not. Okay. So let us begin with some of the existing literature which has also dealt with this kind of aspects in the early days. So fear of firing, of course, it works. It works quite well with most of the organizations, because if the workers feel that they will be fired if they are not performing well as per the assessment of the principal, then obviously they will be a little insecure with respect to their job, and that will give them additional incentive, because it may not affect their current salary, but their future is not ensured, in a sense that they may not be retained in the work. So that concern will make them work harder. Okay, and some of the out of them, one model you have already known is Shapiro-Stiglitz, that is efficiency wage hypothesis, which tells you that in a repeated game, even if there is more possibility of moral hazard, but if the punishment is like if you are caught shirking on the job, then I will fire you. So under that kind of threat in a repeated game, the worker will care for their future profit, future wage, and all these utilities. So they will not be shirking. Okay. So that's one model that you already know. Okay. Similarly, there are other models, and the purpose of those models are essentially to prove that you do not need the current incentive to incentivize your current output, but maybe the incentives will act from the future reward, and those future reward can come in many different forms, including whether you are retained in the job or not. Okay. So the next one is very interesting, and there is an explicit treatment, formal treatment of this Holmstrom model in Gibbon's Journal of Economic Perspectives, 1998. Okay. So although it is given quite explicitly, I will not be doing it quite rigorously here, but you should be able to follow the steps, and in case you don't follow, don't worry, because the basic thrust point is very simple. It tells you that workers in the beginning may not know their true ability. Okay. So as a result, when the outcome of their effort is dependent on not only their effort but also their type, that means their ability, and plus some uncertain parameters, which is essentially decides the state of the world. So all these three things, when they determine the workers' output, and if those outputs are going to help the principal, in terms of forming a belief about the worker's type or the worker's ability, then in the early years of employment, the managers or any worker would like to really work hard in order to impress upon the principle that they are of higher quality worker. Okay, so that is the reason you will see that managers typically work too hard in early years and not hard enough in later years. Okay, and the main reason why this kind of the outcome happens, essentially initially the managers would like to impress upon the principle that they are of a higher quality type, and we are assuming there are multiple principles, in a sense that even if this current principle for whom this particular worker or manager is working tend to ignore this particular learning that will be done on the job, looking at the sequence of output that is produced, say for example, say why not from the current period to say up to Tth period. So all these will be observed when the contract will be signed for the YT T+1th period. Then, sorry, did you say anything? So when this all these periods output will be observed and then principal updates his belief, then the future contract will depend on all this experience of output, and that will determine the principal's belief about the type of the worker. And based on that type of the worker, obviously its performance will be evaluated along that line, along with its quality. So as a result, there is a prospect of getting better pay. So what happens that when there are multiple principals, even the current principal may not be willing to learn all your these good traits, but other principals will be learning. So as a result, if you are managing well and the outcome of all your initial days of work is well known to the world of employment, then necessarily the principals will update their belief based on your initial days of performance. And once the image of yours or the belief about your true ability is established at a higher pedestal, then there is very little that will happen to you in the future. So because the principals are convinced that you are a good quality worker, so then in the latter years, you tend to relax a bit and you will not work hard enough. Okay, so this has been typical scenario for most of the managers, and empirically it has been observed that in the early days of their career, they really work hard, and as when they become slightly old, they gradually tend to relax a bit and not giving enough kind of effort into their job. Okay, and there are empirical work which has established this aspect. Someone is talking at the background. Can you please mute yourself? Okay. So this particular aspect is developed in the following manner. If you are good in little bit of statistics and inference, then this particular place will be very easy for you to understand. This is a one-page formal derivation of this learning model, okay, where the output is dependent on the ability of the worker and the action taken by the worker and the epsilon t, which is the kind of a noise term, okay, with a distribution given. So you can see through this particular small baby learning model that there will be learning towards the upward if the workers in the beginning actually chooses the AT to influence that the evaluation or the assessment of NITA is more towards on the higher side, and then that would be helpful for them to get higher payoff in the future. Okay. So remember again, in this particular format of the model, there is no current payment which is related to your current performance. It is essentially that your stock of all the contributions is being assessed, and that regarding your type, the principal is forming belief and they are learning. And then based on that learning, there will be some upward revisions of the pay as you go along. Okay. And for this kind of learning model to work, you need two things. One is that you need multiple principals, so that even if your current principal doesn't give enough importance to this learning, even then there will be somebody else in the market who will give importance to this commonly available information, that common knowledge of the worker performance, and as a result the wage rate in the market will go up. But on the other hand, there has to be lack of commitment on the part of the manager that it will not be staying put in the same job forever. So in other words, it will not have any commitment in terms of sticking to this particular job, and it can switch the job as and when it feels like. Okay, so based on this learning and lack of commitment, you will be able to get a situation that in the early days of the manager's work life, they will be actually working hard, but not so hard at the latter years of their life. Okay, so that's it. Now there is another dimension which is called ratchet effect. I am not directly doing it. Okay, so essentially the idea is very simple. It tells you that you actually, in the initial days, ratchet effect is just opposite of what we just said. That in the initial days, people do not know exactly how difficult or how easy the work is. So the principal is hiring you to do a job, and I don't know whether the work that I am assigning to you is very hard or very easy. Okay. And as a result, I will try to have some kind of understanding based on how well you are doing on the job. Now, what happens then? This particular manager, they try to restrict their output in the initial days by not showing that the job is really easy and they can do it well. So what they do, they basically take a staggered approach in terms of, in the initial days, not working very hard or showing a very good performance result. Okay, just to give the signal to the principal that the job is really tough, because principal also doesn't know about the nature of the job or the character of the job in terms of how much difficult it is. So the manager will typically try to go slow on the initial days, and they will try to restrict output in the initial days, because they do not want to give the signal that the nature of the task is very easy to do. And if they show that, then the chances that the principal might reduce their wage in the future, or maybe they will add more tasks to this agent. Okay, so that's a kind of ratchet effect. There's a good paper by Gibbons in a two-period model. It was shown that how the ratchet effect actually works. Okay, and output restriction in the initial days will be a natural outcome. And the interesting point is that there does not exist any compensation scheme that induces efficient effort. So these are essentially I am discussing in order to give you the some kind of snapshot view of how this particular the incentive theory is progressing over the years, and which is much beyond the standard incentive theory that you have learned in GAME, or maybe you'll be learning in other courses, but incentive theory has moved much beyond that. Okay, and these are some of the glimpses of those, and if you are interested, you can obviously go into the details of these models. Okay, so this is helpful. Now we are going for paying for future performance, which means that I will be paying you something today so that you acquire some skill, and that acquisition of skill will help you help my output in the farm. Okay, that will add value to my farm. Okay, so it is not that the skill is useful on the spot, but the skill will be useful in the future. And in such a context, the investment of the agent will be critical, and the incentive will then work not from the current output and current effort, but it will work in terms of the prospect of getting higher pay in the future. Okay. So now this will be working slightly at greater length. Okay. And so the skill acquisition or this investment in capabilities will essentially add the worker potential contribution to farm future value of the farm. Okay. Now you can understand that how difficult it is to write a contract. Why? Because if you remember, we are not able to write contract when the outcome or the output or the value, current value of the farm cannot be ascertained by the third party, that is a court of law. So we moved from the objective assessment to some subjective assessment, and based on that subjective assessment, we developed the relational contract. Okay, so where there is a common and shared understanding about what the outcomes are. So basically, principal agents are able to observe the outcome, but they will not be able to convince a third party, that is court of law. So as a result, no formal contract can be written. Okay. So when the formal contract cannot be written, one way we tried to solve that problem was through the repeated interactions, and we introduced the relational contract. Okay. And now you can imagine that was even under the current value circumstances, it was difficult to write formal contract. Now we are thinking of the worker's contribution to potential value of the farm. Now potential value will be even more difficult. Okay, more difficult to convince a third party about the potential value, because which will not exist at that moment when you go to the court for any kind of redressal of any breach of contract. Okay, so as a result, the contract is impossible to write, and so the subjective assessment, which was then relevant, that at least they were able to come on board with respect to the current contribution of that agent, but that subjective assessment will not be possible in this case, because that we are thinking of future value of the farm. Okay, because if you are well trained today and if you acquire skill, you will certainly add value to my farm tomorrow. Okay, and that valuation a priori I cannot ascertain, even if I have the guess or the kind of subjective assessment that if you are qualified of certain kind, then it will add value to my farm. But then that particular issue, that future contribution will be extremely difficult to have a common shared understanding of the subjective assessment, right? So even if I know as principal that if you are qualified from Delhi school, then you will be able to contribute so much for my farm, but it would be very difficult to have both of us to have a common understanding on that. Okay, so this common understanding will be even more difficult because of this the future value which is associated with this. So now then how we can actually incentivize the skill acquisition, because we are not able to commit to any course of future payment scheme which will help you in terms of getting your own skill acquisition done. Okay, so principal is not able to give a commitment that if you are able to pass with this much percentage, then you will be paid this much money tomorrow, and that's based on the expectation that my subjective assessment that you will add so much value to my farm. Okay, so now then what will be essential is that there will not be a direct incentive which will work in such a circumstances of skill acquisition. So the promise of promotion might work. Okay, so and this promise of promotion is that if you are well qualified and if you are able to get that additional qualification or skill acquisition, then there is an implicit possible kind of understanding between the two parties that the guy, if it is subjectively assessed properly, then will be promoted. Okay. So we will be essentially looking at two different models here. One is up or stay, so which will mean that there might be a promotion, which will be done by the principal for the agent, or the agent will be left where it was. Okay. And the second one was the up or out rule, which says that you essentially either get promoted or you have to leave the job. Okay. So these are essentially, these kind of up or out rule are essentially used in academic institution in North America, where after 6 years of initial days of probationary period as assistant professor, then depending on your kind of publication and all in these first 6 years, that you will be either told to leave the organization or you will be promoted to the next level. Okay. So this is how the incentive works, and that's why assistant professors in North American setup, they really work hard in the initial days, because they all needs to be tenure, and tenure means it's a permanent job. But in the initial years, they are not permanent. They have a job of certain duration, but there is nothing more as commitment. Okay. So we will be looking at this up or stay or up or out rule. Okay. Up or stay means you are left in the same organization. Okay. But up or out rule is you will be asked to leave the organization. Okay. Now the skill acquisition that we are talking about here, we are keeping the things in a broader perspective. So in other words, all our theories which are related to principal agent in internal organizations are equally applicable between a firm and its supplier. Okay. So if you look at the outsourcing, where we have not introduced any kind of complexity in terms of the contract, we have only utilized the linear contract, okay, the two-part tariff contract, but not beyond that in terms of what is implementable in terms of a contract or not, depending on the quality of the supply that the input suppliers are making, and whether there are defective products that is being supplied, okay, or whether the other kind of customization that is required for the farm is being carried out by the supplier or not. But all these the contract that we are now talking about are equally applicable between farm and the supply chain, and so we are thinking of that farm specific human capital acquisition. Okay. So for example, a supplier can be given the task that until and unless you improve your capacity, I am not going to give you any further order. Okay. Or if you do not customize the product according to my need in the following manner, then there might be a problem of the future. So I will not be interested in continuing the relationship with you. So between the farm and the supplier, you can use the same rule as up or stay or up or out rule. Okay. So you increase the payment if the necessary investments are carried out by the supply chain to help you better in terms of the kind of realizing greater value of the farm. Otherwise, you can also think of terminating the contract with that guy. Okay. So with this perspective, we will be looking into the two different up or out rule and up or stay rule. Okay. So let Y denote the firm's assessment of the worker's potential contribution to future farm value. Okay. So this is the firm's own assessment. Okay. Subjective assessment, you can think, based on the worker performance in an initial probationary period. This probationary period may be long, such as 6 years in many accounting and law partnerships and in academics. If the worker spends extra time during the probationary period learning about the firm's markets, competitors, technology, culture, and so on, then the worker will have a high potential contribution for the future. More specifically, suppose the worker's potential contribution is X if the worker does not invest in such farm specific human capital, but is X plus B if the worker does invest. Okay, so the difference is that in case the worker invests, then we are getting our farm value y equal to x plus b. If it does not, then y farm value y will be equal to x. Okay. Now the question is that will the worker make this investment? Now denote the opportunity cost of this time for which it has to learn or acquire this human capital, which will help him to contribute more effectively. So the opportunity cost of that is taken to be C. Okay. Now the question is that this investment will be desirable if the V is greater than C, right? Because V is the value addition out of the skill acquisition and C is the cost of the skill acquisition. So if V is equal to, the V is greater than C, then obviously it is efficient to acquire the skill, okay, and then it will work like that. Now you have to design a contract such that although you are not getting the payment immediately, so you are not getting the benefit of the skill acquisition immediately. So you decide as principle that firm will pay the worker a high wage if the worker achieves this target of X plus B, but a low wage if not. Okay. So now the firm is designing a contract of high wage and low wage. Okay. And high wage is to incentivize that the skill acquisition takes place. Now, if the difference between these wages exceeds the worker opportunity cost of investing, then the worker has an incentive to invest, okay, because it is getting additional pay, and that additional pay is greater than the cost of acquiring the skill. Firm will want to induce such investment only if it receives a productivity increase that exceeds the wage increase. Now see the tussle that is already happening here. So you need to pay higher wage for the worker to incentivize it to acquire the skill. But when you incentivize this guy to acquire the skill, then you are paying higher wage. Now the calculation for the principal is that, okay, I'm incentivizing for this higher skill, but I'm also paying higher wage. So my overall payoff, the net payoff, I should be interested in. So for example, if I want to incentivize you by paying really a high wage so that it is not worthwhile for me to have that skill acquisition in the first place, then I am not going to do that. Okay. So the incentives have to be, the incentive constraints have to be satisfied from both sides. Workers should have incentive to invest in the skill acquisition, and principal should have incentive to pay that higher wage for skill acquisition. Okay. So we'll check that when that is possible and when that is not. So now this is our condition that if WH minus WL is greater than C, then the worker will choose to invest. Okay. And the firm will want to induce investment if V, that is the overall increment in the value of the firm, is greater than the difference in wage that is to be paid to the worker. Okay, so V is greater than WH minus WL, then firm will be willing to induce this the skill acquisition. Because V greater than C, it is simple to find wages that satisfy V greater than WH minus WL, which is greater than C. Okay, so you're just inserting this incremental wage in between and you are able to get this condition satisfied. Now, once we have this condition satisfied, you see that worker has incentive to acquire skill. Similarly, the principal has incentive to pay higher wage in case the skill acquisition takes place. Okay. Now, as for the participation constraint, let R denote the worker's best alternative opportunity. Okay. So the worker can get from the outside employment this R amount. So in that case, the worker is thinking that, okay, if I acquire the skill, I will get WH, but the cost of skill acquisition is C. So WH minus C will be my net payoff being in the job and acquiring the skill. And if that is greater than my reservation payoff, that is the amount that I will get from elsewhere, then I will be willing to make this investment in skill. Okay. And for the farm, what is required is this X plus V minus WH must be, no, this should be X, this should be greater than X, isn't it? Because V is the incremental and WH is the wage we are paying. Okay, we'll look into this constraint later. So you can also find out if there is any problem here. So the farm requires this particular condition that X plus V is the high output case minus this is the WH. But why should it be greater than 0? It should be compared with the low output case, that is X minus WL. Okay. So anyway, but this investment is not interesting unless X plus V minus C. Okay. So this part is clear that C is the cost of skill acquisition, V is the incremental value of that skill. So X plus V minus C is the net gain that would be there between these two parties. Now, if this particular net gain is some problem, I have to look through it. Okay. So anyway, so I don't know why this looks slightly odd in terms of the definition. So then this particular thing has to be greater than R. Now that is for sure, because if this is not greater than R, then you do not get the employment in the first place, because the guy will not work for you. Okay, because your total this particular value that you are generating by keeping the worker and then inducing him to acquire skill, the total amount that you are getting is has to be greater than R, the worker's alternative employment opportunity. Otherwise, this particular initiative is not at all possible to do, because the worker will move to its outside option. Okay. So now what we have to look at is they have simply used this particular condition that X plus B must be greater than C plus R, and then your WH must be between the two. Okay. And if that is so, then X plus V minus WH is greater than 0. That is one condition, but it should not be only greater than 0. It should be something else. Okay, I'll check this particular analysis. This is there in the paper, but I'm not able to completely understand why the conditions are taken like this. Okay. So the issue is that in terms of this particular contract, where contract is possible to be written, not written, these are informal contracts. So if it is possible to give higher wage based on this additional contribution of value V, then it is still possible to have certain conditions satisfied, so that you have incentive from both sides to make the skill acquisition. And as a result, the principal is also willing to pay with WH greater. Okay. So some condition can be worked out. So I'll check whether the way they have worked out is correct or not. Okay. So now the problem is the following. So we have this two-sided incentive problem. Now, suppose that contract based on workers' potential contribution cannot be enforced. So this was done with the assumption that this WH is possible to offer to the worker, conditional on that the contribution to the farm value is X plus V, and this conditional on the skill acquisition that additional gain of V is realized and WH can be paid. Okay. So the contract is that I will pay you extra, the high wage if you acquire the skill, pay you low wage if you don't acquire the skill. But the problem is that suppose you cannot write contract because these are essentially going into the future value consideration. Okay. So potential contribution cannot be enforced. So no, nothing can be written. So then what happened? Then then it is very difficult to satisfy this kind of constraints where the incentive problems from both sides will be satisfied. So the worker will not be trusting the principle that it will actually pay the higher wage because there is nothing in the contract. It cannot be enforced. Okay, and it is based on future valuation. Okay, so the worker cannot trust the principle that it will pay the higher wage. Similarly, the principal will not make this commitment because principal is also concerned that the worker may not be making that investment. So this kind of situation will arise that because of this problem of commitment from both sides, it will not be possible to ensure that efficient skill acquisition takes place. Okay, although the skill acquisition is profitable because B is greater than C, but even then it may not be implementable. Now we have a different model which says that although it may be difficult to implement such kind of scheme where this particular contract cannot be enforced, that is, contract is based on that high pay when high outcome is realized, but it is possible that if we take a slightly different route, that the contract will be something like that up and out rule. So in case they do not work hard, sorry, they do not kind of wait. Okay. So now the question is that if we are unable to write contract along this line where the WH is paid based on this incremental value, then we know there is trust deficit and it is difficult to implement. Now, how difficult it is to implement? Let us come to this example. This will tell you why it is difficult to implement and you are not able to write a contract based on the skill acquisition. Okay. So suppose the wages are WE and WD in the two jobs, and let us consider that there are two types of jobs. Okay, one is easy job and another is difficult job. Okay. Now, so suppose the firm can commit to pay high wage in case of difficult job and low wage in case of easy job. Okay. So formally, you are paying two wages, WE and WD, in the two jobs. The worker will invest if WD minus C, okay, is greater than WE. Because I can always be assigned to the easy job and get paid WE, but if I invest in skill acquisition, I will be assigned to the difficult job, and in that case, I will be able to get WD minus C as my payoff. Okay, so for the workers to invest will be WD minus C greater than WE. Then only it will choose to invest and then subsequently get this difficult job assignment. And the firm will promote a trained worker provided that this is the output, future output in the difficult job when the firm is assigning a trained worker. So this will be the output from the trained worker in a difficult job, minus this is the wage rate that will be paid for working in the difficult job. So this is the net payoff that the firm will get when a trained worker is assigned to a difficult job and WD is paid. So this will be the firm's payoff. which has to be greater than, firm can simply assign that guy to the easy job and pay the the job salary, that is WE, and YET minus WE will be its net payoff. So if the net payoff of assigning the trained worker in the difficult job is greater than assigning him to the easy job, then the firm will do this. Okay. So this is one condition for the firm assignment of the agent in the difficult job, okay, as opposed to easy job. So now we need that this particular YDT minus YET, so now you just change the side, YDT minus YET has to be greater than WD minus WE. And we know that WD minus WE from here has to be greater than C. So what we are having is that if we have this condition, then YDT minus YET has to be greater than WD minus WE, which has to be greater than C, and then only we will be encouraging the worker to be trained, and then based on the training, difficult job will be assigned, and as a result, higher wage WD will be paid. Now, training has to be efficient. Now, training has to be efficient means what? That the value of from a trained worker who will be getting the output that will be produced is YDT minus the value of the output when the worker is not trained, and when it is not trained, it cannot be assigned to the task of a difficult job. So easy job has to be given. So YEN is the output, the future value of the output when the non-trained worker is assigned to an easy job. Okay. So the difference, I have the option as employer, I have the option of assigning the worker in an easy job when it is not trained. That option is there. As opposed to that, I can assign the trained worker in a difficult job, and this will be the value of the output. So this value of the output minus this value of the output must be greater than C. And if this condition doesn't hold, then there is no point inducing the worker to acquire skill, because this skill acquisition involves this C amount of cost. Okay. So now this condition YDT minus YEN greater than C. This is different from YDT minus YET greater than C that we have derived. Okay. So although you have this condition that might be possible to satisfy because your total cost of acquisition of skill is something which helps your output to go up quite a bit as compared to an easy task with a non-trained worker. Okay. But that condition is very different from YDT minus YET, where a trained worker is not assigned to the difficult job and higher wage is not paid, but this is the YET that is a higher value. Okay. YET is higher than YEN. So you can easily see that the difference between these two, satisfying this condition, will be harder. So this condition is difficult to be satisfied. Okay. So then the upshot of this analysis is that up or stay promotion rule. That means here the guy is getting training, then you are promoting him, and then the difficult task is assigned, and this should be the valuation. But instead, you can also keep him there. So he is trained, but you are leaving him at the same point. So that is the stay rule. Okay. And then YET will be the value of the output. And we have just seen that satisfying this condition will be harder to do. Okay. So in short, an up or stay promotion rule where the worker is either promoted or remains in the original job creates a tension between needing a large enough wage gap to induce the worker to invest and keeping the wage gap small enough that the firm is willing to promote. Okay. So for the promotion, the firm is interested in this particular condition, which gives you this particular condition at the end. Okay. So firm wants the wage gap to be less. Okay. Whereas the worker wants wage gap to be large. Okay. In order to make the investment in the skill acquisition. Because of this tension between these two parties, then there is this problem that you may not be able to get all these conditions satisfied, so that skill acquisition takes place. Okay. But now we'll show that upward stay rule, where you are not actually firing the agent, okay, and allowing him to get the outside option, is difficult to satisfy this particular condition of skill acquisition. But up or out rule can do it better. Okay. And up or out rule, let us just look at in a very simple way. So now investment is not interesting until it is efficient. So what is important is that your investment has to be that the amount of value that is contributing to the firm, that V must be greater than C. Okay. So otherwise it is not interesting. Okay. Now, if the worker anticipates a promotion for investing, the worker will invest in if the high wage W star minus the opportunity cost exceed the best alternative. Okay. So this is the same kind of condition, but here the problem is that it will not be retained in the firm. So it is a up or out contract. So if it is not promoted, it will simply be shown the door, and that guy has to go and take up the outside option, and that is R there. Okay. So now, investment is efficient if X plus V minus C greater than R. Okay. Again, this needs to be really checked, both this particular analysis, why these things are being done, what are the definitions that are used. So this is efficient because this is greater, this side is greater than the outside option of the worker that it is able to get from outside. So this has to be first satisfied in order to have investment in the first place. Otherwise, no investment will occur. The worker will invest if the high wage W star minus C is greater than R, because it has the outside opportunity of R. Okay. The firm will promote a worker who has invested, provided that X plus V will be its value, minus W star, that is the high wage has to be paid. So that is greater than 0. Okay. And again, I'm raising the same question that whether this should be compared with the X, okay, minus W low. Why they are comparing this with 0? Thus, any value of W star satisfying X plus V greater than W star, and that W star is greater than C plus R from here, will induce the worker to invest and yet cause the firm to promote the worker. Okay. So the worker will be promoted, and then in this particular case, according to the analysis done by Gibbons based on these two papers, that this particular condition is easier to be satisfied than the previous condition where up or stay rule was being implemented. Okay. So this particular up or out rule is helpful in terms of at least inducing the worker to acquire skill which will add value to the firm. Okay. So you also check this particular calculations and the way they have defined and how easily this can be interpreted. I will also check. Okay. So in my view, there is little lapse here, but maybe they have some definition of the issues in terms of some normalization from the old project in terms of zero or something which I'm missing, okay? And as a result, if it is zero from the old project, then the entire analysis will go through. But we have to check whether that was indeed assumed. So with this, we are able to look at that after relational contract, there are possibilities that promise of promotion can help in terms of skill acquisition on the one hand, okay, and also incentivizing in a manner that they there is problem of future the incentive based on the future payment, but the promotion can actually work there, okay? Okay, so we have actually done only two things today. One is the career concern in terms of how managers actually work in the beginning in terms of influencing the belief about themselves by the market, okay? And that's why they work hard in the beginning, irrespective of the amount of pay that they get. So this is telling you that there is substantial incentive anyway in the real life situations, which are much beyond your simple incentive contract that we typically attribute in a incentive contract literature. So these are further development that people will have substantial incentive anyway because of other consideration, not necessarily their pay being tied to the current performance, okay? So this is one such, that career concern and influencing the belief in the market. And second is the promotion rule, that how the paying for future performance. So the promotion is essentially you are actually promoting and then giving higher pay in the future, and then that higher pay is incentivizing the firms in terms of skill acquisition in the current situation, although they know for sure that they are not being paid in the current period for their additional skill acquisition that they are doing, okay? And the standard examples I have also talked about is in academics and in law firms and other cases, there are situations and empirical work to that effect, okay? And then the last point is that all these considerations that you have done can also be generalized to a relationship between the firm and a supplier, incentive contracts between versus within firms. So there are ways you can actually think of that. These are not only limited or restricted within the firm, it is also between the firms. These are equally applicable, all these roles that we have talked about, whether it is career concern or it is basically the up or out role. So the conclusion is that the classic incentive theory, they focused on risk and insurance, okay? So that is their trade-off, and that was the main development in 70s and 80s, okay? But incentive theory has progressed much beyond that, and we have seen, and we'll be seeing more of such cases that where people will be working hard, not based on their own kind of incentive that is being given to them in the current period, but many other things. And also in this context, let me also mention that there are intrinsic motivations. So in other words, extrinsic motivations are observable incentive scheme, but intrinsic motivations are that some people have substantial incentive to work just out of their own liking, okay? And some of the classic examples are that people do work hard in NGOs and other kind of missionary organizations where they truly believe that they align themselves with the cause of that organization, okay? So there are intrinsic motivations for working hard, and they are not related to pay in that manner. So we have, from the risk incentive, we have say pay for, so the firm gets what they pay for. So you imagine that objective performance was our second model, and that is where we are paying for that objective assessment of performance, okay, and then our incentive was based on that performance parameter. In that case, we will not be able to generate the output that well, but we will be able to get the performances which is objectively measured, and obviously the firm will get what they are paying for. They are paying for performance, not for the value of the output. Okay, so that is one stream of literature, and where we have actually looked at the scale and alignment issues of the performance along with the output the vector. And then these are the third kind of situations, the institutions that create incentive for skill acquisition rather than simply for effort. Okay, so read this particular paper. This is very descriptive paper. Okay, Journal of Economic Perspective, and based on that, you try to figure out what exactly were the problems with these two models. I will also try to figure that out. Any questions?